Happy middle of the week, everybody. It is a beautiful, beautiful Tuesday. I tell you, have this kind of day in the middle of the winter is just pretty cool. I know tomorrow's going to be a different story, maybe a little snow, but wow, what a beautiful day that we've got today. So we're going to dive into our next hero of faith this week, and this is one that's pretty ought to be pretty familiar with us if we've been in church very long at all, and that is Noah. Noah is our hero of faith this week, and so let's dive right into the Word. We're going to be in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7 is where we're going to start. And it says, "It was by faith that Noah built a large boat to save his family from the flood. He obeyed God, who warned him about the things that had never happened before. By his faith, Noah condemned the rest of the world, and he received the righteousness that comes by faith." So as we've tried to do, we've tried to identify a little bit about the people we're studying. And so who was Noah? Well, we know he was the grandson of Methuselah. Genesis 6:8 also says that Noah found favor with the Lord. And boy, if there's one thing that's said about me, boy, I would be okay with it saying that Michael found favor with the Lord. But that's what it says about Noah. And we don't have lots of history about Noah, but in terms of the story, God decided that he regretted creating man on the earth. Man had gotten very wicked, and he had regretted it, and so he realized that Noah and his family were righteous, and so he wanted to save them, but he wanted to destroy the world. And so he warned Noah, told Noah to build an ark to get his family and two of each of the animals, 7 of the unclean animals on the boat. And so God was directing him to do that. And you know the story, it rained, that flooded the earth, and Noah and his family survived along with the animals that were on the ark. And I don't want to trivialize the story here, but I really want to focus in on what the faith piece of this really is. And it's probably one of the easiest faith pieces to follow, because you have to understand, when God told Noah to build an ark because it was going to flood, there was no concept of that because it hadn't rained. And so there was no concept of what that was going to be like, And so, Noah's building this ark for 100 years. And so can you imagine all the people who would say, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you building this ark? What's a flood?" All of these things that Noah had to endure over these 100 years. And the sheer amount of willpower and faith in God that Noah had to have to persevere that long in doing everything that God had called him to do. And so it really warrants us looking at Noah's faith and deciding, we want that kind of faith. And so when we look at Noah and his faith, there are really 3 things that we can really glean from Noah and his walk with God and his faith in God. The first thing we need to understand is that Noah's faith was built around his fear of the Lord. When we talk about the fear of the Lord, we're not talking about being scared. We're not talking about a terror, being frightened in terror of something. We're talking about this reverence. One of the tools that I use is Bible Hub, and it says this. It says, "It may mean that he was influenced by proper caution and reverence for God. His reverence and respect for God induced him to act under the belief that what he had said was true, and that the calamity which he had predicted would certainly come upon the world." So Noah's reverence and his fear and his respect for God was a result of that he believed the words that God spoke to him. He believed that what God said was true and it was going to happen. So that's that faith in God that resulted from this fear, this reverence and respect for God, because Noah believed what God told him was going to happen. And so, that's something we can learn from. Our faith in God should come out of our fear for him, not scared, not terrorized by God, but our proper respect and our reverence for God and His Word, and that God means what He says, and we can believe God and His Word. And so that was the first thing about Noah and his faith. The second thing about Noah and his faith is that Noah's faith moved him to action. Noah's faith moved him to action. Genesis 6:22 says, "So Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded him." He didn't dwell on it for 50 years. He didn't think about it for 50 years or 75 years or 99 years and said, "Oh, last year I guess I better get around." No, Noah's faith in God moved him to action. 2 Peter 2:5 says, "And God did not spare the ancient world except for Noah and the 7 others in his family. Noah warned the world of God's righteous judgment, so God protected Noah when He destroyed the world of ungodly people with the vast flood." And so what we see from that verse in 2 Peter 2:5 is that not only did Noah work by building the ark, but he also preached and really warned the world of God's judgment. And so Noah's faith in believing that God was going to do what He said He was going to do moved him to action. It moved him to work. Boy, I wish we would be moved to work for God in our times, instead of moved to lash out at people and moved to voice an opinion. Boy, I really wish we would just be moved to work. Our faith would move us to work. We heard Sunday, from the missionary about the work that's going on in Latin America, and being moved to the missionaries being moved to work in that area. I love the song that they sang at the end, "My house is full, but my field is empty. Who will go and work for me today?" Our faith should move us to action. Our faith would move us to work for Him. The Great Commission, go you into all the world and preach the gospel. To all. We're commissioned to go work, but it's because of our faith. Do we really believe that God's coming soon? That Jesus is coming back soon? Do we really believe it? Well, what is our faith propelling us to do about it? What is our faith? Are we sharing? Are we living a life of example? Are we trying to draw people to Him? So Noah's faith moved him to action. Our faith should move us to action. We should believe that God means what He says, and that should motivate us to action. And then lastly, Noah's faith set him apart from the world. At the end of the Hebrews 11:7, it says, "By his faith Noah condemned the rest of the world, and he received the righteousness that comes by faith." When it talks about condemning there, it's not talking about necessarily that Noah stood on the side of the boat and spoke condemnation to the world. That's not what it's saying. What it's saying is that Bible Hub says this: the meaning is that by his confidence in God and his preparation for the flood, he showed the wisdom of his own course and the folly of theirs. So what that's saying is, what Noah showed, because he was obedient to God and he was living righteously on the earth, it was a very clear distinction between Noah and the rest of the world. The Bible talks about the evil that was going on. So there was a clear distinction. I'm worried that in our culture today that there's not a clear distinction between the church and the world. And when I'm saying church, I'm talking about the people in it. Can the world tell the difference in us? I don't know. I think we need to think about that. I just don't know. I don't know that I think we as a culture have bought into the lies of the enemy to fight and be divisive and to be to argue instead to bring about reconciliation, which is what the word says. So I would encourage us to really take a look at our own faith. Is it helping us distinguish from the world? 2 Corinthians 6:17 tells us to come apart and be separate from the world. And I really think we need to really work a little bit more on that. And I'm talking to myself included. You know, we make decisions differently. We ought to make decisions differently than the world does. Yes, I'm an American citizen, and I'm so thankful of it. But my eternal home is in heaven. You know, we don't heaven. Christianity is not a democracy. Christianity is not a democracy. It's not founded in those things. You know, we're following a God who is all powerful, all knowing. In Him we live and breathe and have our being. And so it should set us apart. Yeah, Bible calls us a peculiar people. People are going to think we're weird. And that's okay. It ought to. So I want you to be encouraged today as we think about the faith of Noah. Just to review that Noah's faith was built around his reverence, his respect, his fear of God, because what he believed that what God said He was going to do, that He would do. Noah's faith moved him to action. When he believed it, he set about to do the work of God because he believed God. And so he worked, and then he preached. And then lastly, his faith set him apart from the rest of the world. It distinguished him from the rest of the world. And so, guys, I'm going to encourage you this week to make sure that our faith is made up of this healthy respect and reverence to God, that He means what He says. And then our faith moves us to action, to do the work that God has called us to do. And then lastly, that our faith would set us apart from the world, that people would look at us differently because we're living our life differently because of the faith that we have in Jesus. So guys, I hope you have a great rest of your week. And I look forward to seeing you again on Sunday. And don't forget men's retreat. If you're interested in going, it's $150. You can pay online. You can pay at the church if you need to make payments. If you need help, if you're worried about being able to be able to go financially, please take the opportunity to let somebody know. Please, please, please. We don't want you to miss out, and so we can see about getting help if you need it. So please keep that men's retreat that's coming up in April. If you have any questions, just let me know. But God bless you. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you soon.